Tower Defense Simulator has a lot of badges. However, the game also has 7 lesser known unreleased badges, which are generally more objective based, and range from as easy as joining the game to as difficult as beating Fallen mode with exactly 1 HP. So I joined the game, getting the first unofficial badge, and decided to go for the dual power badge, which requires you to defeat a dual lane map. For this first run, I ended up in a duo game on Candy Lane, and I made the first mistake of the challenge by picking Fallen mode. In this run, got a little scary. There were multiple extremely close calls. As the difficulty ramped up, it got harder and harder to survive, until the tank finally spawned, promptly running through our defense and ending the first run. However, for once, the commander's advice was actually useful, as he provided the ingenious tip, not enough numbers. So I got into a quad player game on Badlands. This run got pretty wild. We had outlaws, gold scouts, accelerators, but most of our power was focused on the root of the two paths, which meant zombies could get far too close. And we ended up losing to the tank again. I decided to try one more time. I joined Winter Stronghold and lowered my standards a bit by picking Molten mode. And with a team level of 175, 248, and 13, we actually did manage to cruise through the game with little trouble, completing the double lane badge. The next badge I decided to go for was the Golden Power badge, which would have been awarded from opening a gold crate. So I bought some coins, bought a gold crate, and got the Golden Crook Boss. This is the only golden tower I've never had across my 2 accounts, so I decided to bring it in my loadout as I transitioned to the next badge, which required you to beat a map on all difficulties solo. Now I am somewhat of an all difficulties connoisseur. I chose Sky Islands as the map and hopped in a normal mode game. I brought the new Gold Crook Boss to try out, and I came to the conclusion it's pretty good. Its DPS is very good for the early game, and I always like spawning towers. So with the Gold Crook Boss and Gold Minigunner, both normal and multi mode were fairly easy. However, I hit a bit of a wall on Fallen mode. The problem is that Sky Islands is not a great map for ground towers, due to the map being split into 2 pieces. This meant, although I did good damage at first, once the Fallen King got past the initial range of my towers, I had to move everything, which was pretty difficult, and I ended up panicking and losing by around 50,000 health. So I called day 1 and went to sleep. On day 2, I decided to switch out Gold Crook Boss for Gladiator and Gold Mini for Accelerator. It's a higher DPS loadout, but it's also more difficult to use due to the need for Gladiator Call of Arms and the wind up time on Accelerator. I ended up leaking several enemies early game, going down to a questionable 6 health, and the run didn't seem to be going great, as I barely managed to kill the glitches and the tank. However, I did pick things up in the late game, and I reached the final wave with 8 maxed accelerators and around 20 gladiators. I managed to get the Fallen King down to only 50,000 health as I walked out of the initial range, but at this point I started panicking, trying to sell and replace all my excels as fast as possible, pretty suboptimally. Although it was close, I did barely manage to kill the final boss, and that was the solo player badge completed. This left only 3 more badges. Now, around this time, I received an email with my Commander plush code, so I decided to try it as I transitioned into the next 2 badges, which required you to buff 20 towers with Commander's Call of Arms and buff 25 towers with DJ. I grabbed Gold Scout, the cheapest tower in the game, and hopped into a Molten game. The plush skin is pretty unique with its slowed FPS animation style, and it definitely has a lot of charm, but honestly it wasn't really worth the money. Anyways, I fit 33 scouts into the DJ's range and buffed 31 with the Commander, completing the 2 badges, which left only 1 badge, Verge of Death, which required you to beat Fallen mode with exactly 1 HP. Now obviously the difficult part is getting your base down to the precise right amount of health without accidentally dying. My plan was to take the majority of the damage from the abnormal boss and try to leak a few weaker zombies to put me down to 1 HP. So I chose Crossroads, one of the easiest maps in the game. I focused more on farms early game, so my gladiator would purposely be a bit underpowered. Eventually the abnormal boss arrived and got through my gladiators as I hoped. However, it had too little health, and it ended up bringing my base down to 4 HP, which is not quite right. So I rejoined the game and did essentially the same strategy, and this time the boss ended up getting through with too little health again, and I ended up with 2 HP. I reset once again, and finally did manage to get my base down to 1 health. However, getting this right really destabilizes the run, and I ended up losing to Fallens due to bad accelerator placement and a lack of money. I decided to replace accelerator with Gold Mini, which has lower DPS but much more consistency. And once again, by micromanaging gladiators, I was able to get down to exactly 1 HP. But this time I had farmed better and was able to get gold minis earlier, and with the help of a commander, they were able to kill the Fallens. From there, I maxed my farms and slowly placed and upgraded minis for the rest of the run. With such a long path around the towers, I was finally able to kill the Fallen King, completing Verge of Death. It's a shame that these badges never got officially implemented, as this was actually a pretty fun challenge and there's nothing really like it in the actual game. Anyways, subscribe.